He is the Beast Unleashed, Ajani Goldmane, a hero plagued by pride, whose mind was never as strong as his own heart, and as a certified cat boy, meow, he's a planeswalker that I've been very eager to talk about for quite some time now. Ajani is a magic character, towering, kind, and full of sorrow. This one-eyed albino Leonin warrior weighs an impressive 250 pounds and stands proud at 6 foot 6 inches tall. Wow, that's like 6.5 $5 footlongs? What a tank. Now, Ajani's core beliefs hinge on the idea that strength exists to protect the weak, which, yes, is admirable, but also a very dangerous belief system in the long run, especially because he believes that tyranny needs to be challenged at all cost, which, includes lives. His pride and care put him into many dangerous paths, such as gods, the Phyrexians, and even Nicol Bolas himself. Now, as we'll see, his worldview does evolve over time, driven by rage and then eventually focusing on guiding through peace, which is also why throughout his card prints, he's always primarily been a white mana character, those who are, generally pure and righteous. Though he has also been splashing in some green and red depending on where we're at in the story. The greatest question, though, is what is stronger for Ajani himself? I mean, his peaceful evolution or the rage that's actually slumbering at his core? Let's find that out together right now. Now, this doesn't seem obvious, but Ajani wasn't actually always loved by the masses in Magic. He was born in albino Nacatl, a tribe of big lion men, kinda like the Thundercats. And since that'll be important later on, he was raised in the Naya region of the Plain Alara. His white fur, unfortunately, was a trait that his clan ominously described as, I quote, white as death, which is ironic to me since, well, black is the death color in Magic usually. It even has the little skull icon here. So it's kind of clear that Ajani was not a good omen for his own tribe. He was in fact a very bad omen. And pretty much from the start, Ajani grew up on the edges of his own community, tolerated at best, and quietly avoided most of the time. And boy, do I wish I could tell you more about what happened around then, but all we really know is at this point in his life, he lost that one eye of his and became just very super badass looking. We also don't really know what happened to his parents, but that's kind of okay because his big brother was always there instead. He kind of has a little bit of a Sasuke vibe going for him since his elder brother Jazal was really all that mattered, which is so real since Jazal was the lion goat, dare I say. Jazal rose very quickly among the Nacatl, earning respect, prestige, probably a girlfriend, or 12, and eventually the honor title of Ka in the Khazal Valley Pride. And as far as brothers go, Jazal just was top tier because he actually didn't seek power for its own sake. He truly believed that if he stood high enough, Ajani would finally be lifted together with him, which I bet you didn't see coming and is just a very heartwarming and noble goal to have. What a great story. And so, of course, in this very messed up, twisted world we live in, that didn't work out. Them's the breaks, kid. Ajani just remained an outsider, and over time he actually began to believe that this quiet cruelty, was just simply what he maybe even deserved. At least he did have a real buddy, the tribe's shaman, Zaliki, one of the few who treated him as something a little bit more than just a bad omen. But despite his status, Ajani was still extraordinary. He actually possessed a very rare ability to perceive the soul of a being itself, meaning that he could just look into others and see the essence of their spirit, draw it out, and then shape it through his own magic. And as a result of this, Ajani actually ironically became the finest healer the tribe had ever known in its history. It earned him no prestige, no appreciation, and really just brought on more silence, if anything. I guess him being an outcast and powerful kind of rubbed people all sorts of wrong. But still, Ajani just willingly accepted all of this since he really only cared about his older brother. And so instead, Ajani convinced himself that staying small was just the price he'd have to pay to push Jazal forward. Now, flashing forward a little bit, the festival of Marisi was swiftly approaching. Oh, what's that? You don't celebrate the festival of Marisi where you live? How do I explain it? Well, to put it simply, it's essentially the Nacatl version of Independence Day, celebrating an event known as Breaking the Coil. And The coil really was just a big stone plate that had a bunch of evil laws that, Marisi had shattered. You get the idea. Anyhow, on that day, things took a very dark turn suddenly. First, Ajani was attacked by a group of humans, but things then grew much scarier as after he had actually defeated the humans, Jazal realized they had been sent specifically for Ajani. Probably figured out that all that soul manipulating stuff must have gotten around because he was being hunted by other people now. So naturally, Ajani wanted to repay his brother's protection and maybe, just maybe, earn a little bit of respect. Ajani then went on the ritual hunt for the feast. He then brought down a Godsire, not to be confused with the Pokemon Clodsire, right? And defeating this mighty Quagsire was an incredible feat, so of course the honor was stolen by this dude, Tinoch, one of his most vicious haters. After the fires burned low, a dark figure crept through the sleeping pride and unleashed shades of black magic. And amongst this wicked chaos, Jazal was murdered in his own lair, struck down by a black axe, a dark mirror of Ajani's own weapon. And then, as Ajani held his own brother's body, he heard Jazal's voice one last time, and when he opened his eye again, he was no longer in Naya. Ajani had plane shifted and disappeared in a golden light storm. In this moment, his planeswalker spark had finally ignited, but unlike other planeswalkers that I've talked about on this channel before, yes, we have other videos, please check them out, this actually wasn't a moment of triumph or rage. It just awoke from some unbearable loss of family. So, Ajani's first uncontrolled planeswalk dropped him straight onto Jund, which, if I may be so bold, is a terrible place to land when you're emotionally shattered and brand new to multiversal travel. Just my own opinion, because Jund is composed of active volcanoes, sharp mountain ledges, has some, ripe and pungent sulfur-filled skies, so not to mention it's just grossly hot, full of tar, and generally not a great vibe for a vacation or anything really. Luckily, after displacing himself though, he met one of the most brutal characters in the MTG universe, Sarkhan Vol. And Big Sarkhan did two very important things back to back. First, he saved Ajani from the dragon Kartus, and then he gave Ajani arguably the worst advice for that very moment. Because Sarkhan listened to Ajani's story, active listening, right, and told him to just embrace his anger and channel it. His idea was that Ajani should track down his brother's murderer, and then his third gift arrived. Sarkhan, a planeswalker himself by the way at the time, showed Ajani how to planeswalk back to Naya, setting him firmly on the path of brutal vengeance. And what can I say? He didn't spare even a moment. Ajani returned to Jazal's lair and found only blood and the shattered remains of his brother's axe, and he reforged the surviving axe head into a new weapon to symbolize his new intent. A sick double-sided glaive axe that I kind of want a replica of. Not gonna lie, it looks pretty sick. And since Jazal's body had already been cremated, Ajani spread his brother's ashes across his own fur and went looking for answers, which is pretty metal as hell, honestly. And guess who done murdered his big bro? Yeah, you won't believe it. It was that rat Tinoch that we talked about earlier. Their confrontation could be described with one very simple word: gnarly. Ajani dangled that little punk Tinoch over a cliff, and so Tinoch dragged Ajani down with him, but newsflash, Ajani could teleport planeswalk away mid-fall, vanishing into the Blight Eternities, the space between the different planes in the multiverse. He then later on landed in Bant, another shard of the plane Alara. You can kind of tell that, these are what were used to then name different color combinations in Magic, but here Ajani was tended to by Elspeth, Tyrell, and the Bomb Givers. After recovering, Ajani warned Elspeth of the coming storm and returned to Naya, only to learn the truth was far messier than he ever imagined. It turns out that I lied to you a little bit, because Tinoch actually wasn't the killer after all. Instead, it seemed that the mighty hero Marisi was actually pulling the strings all along, and as he confronted him, this elven shaman named Mayal appeared, and Marisi sort of just pointed Ajani's anger in the direction of a bigger threat of the moment, the Elder Dragon, Nicol Bolas. That guy is everywhere. Already made a video about him. Ajani tried to hunt down Bolas, but then this massive event called the Conflux began and messed everything up, because in a crazy feat of magic, the 5 shards of Alara began to merge back into one single world. And pulled into all of this chaos, Ajani joined the Mage Slayer, Kresh, and Clan Nel Toth, fighting his way to the edge of Grixis. And there, he finally learned the truth. Zaliki, Ajani's one friend, the shaman, had actually been the one who slew Jazal. He was manipulated by Marisi, who at this point was recently slain too, meaning my man Ajani didn't get clean vengeance at all. No satisfying ending, no catharsis, nothing. Instead, what happened is Nicol Bolas arrived, and as you can imagine, he was here to conquer. He didn't really care about Ajani's private, little quarrels. But Ajani could not let that happen. Jazal, of course, would have never stood down, and so he couldn't do that either. In a desperate last stand, Ajani severed everyone's mana bonds and absorbed the remaining power of the Maelstrom, causing the Conflux. Through his Planeswalker powers and his soul manipulation, he summoned an effigy of Bolas' soul. Don't ask me how, he just did, and then used that to banish Bolas from Alara altogether. When the war ended, Ajani was offered everything it ever wanted: respect, leadership, the title of Ka, and he refused it all. He wasn't that Ajani anymore. He was now more. He was sad Ajani. And even worse, Bolas was still out there, doing his freaky dragon god stuff, again, other video, and unfortunately for our hero of the day, Bolas understood now the mighty powers that Ajani actually had. From that day forward, Ajani Goldmane was never left out of the dragon's plans, and Bolas would see to it that Ajani would never defeat him ever again. Sometime after the big conflux happened, Ajani was a little bit lonely, so he went looking for his old pal Elspeth again. I respect the hustle, big dog, by the way. I mean, big cat. Anyways, he retraced the steps and eventually found her in the gladiator pits of Urborg, a pretty, rad tropical island in the plain of Dominaria. And she was actually just there slamming it down big style with another heavily armored planeswalker when Ajani intervened just before Elspeth struck a killing blow. In true stand-up Lionman fashion, he urged her to return to Alara, insisting that she could do far more good there than destroying herself for coin in the pits. Elspeth, though, refused, convinced that Band was already doomed at this point and hope itself was pointless, which is totally reasonable, and my seasonal depression has led me to some similar thoughts sometime in the past too. So, like every cool cat, Ajani respected her decision, but he did admit that her loss of hope did very much sadden him, and before leaving, returned her the armor that she had abandoned on Band. Is that why it's called Band? No, but it's kind of funny. And then Ajani went to one of the coolest planes in Magic the Gathering, the Greco-Roman mythology-inspired Theros. At least that's one of my favorites. This entire next section of the video is actually the plot of the Theros Born of the Gods Journey into Nyx set block for your pure gamers out there, by the way. You see, Big A here realized that he couldn't just walk away from Elspeth again, because watching her spiral had already cost him so much, so he followed her to Theros. And it wasn't a wild experience for him, since Ajani already knew Brimus, another badass Leonin that he once fought beside, except now he was no longer just a warrior, he had become a king, which is like every warrior's dream, I guess, so good on you, Brimus. But then one night, while spooky, scary stories were being shared and probably some s'mores and skinny dipping around the campfires of the Oreskos, Ajani finally learned the truth of what Elspeth had really endured and the injustices that had been done to her. So Ajani pleaded for Brimus to send warriors to search for her, and before long, Ajani and Elspeth were once again reunited at Tethmos this time. Now, Elspeth was clearly wounded in ways that Ajani would not be able to heal, but she even refused to just speak of it. Growth isn't always about healing, sometimes it's about moving forward, right? Instead, she promised that they would set things right, and Ajani stayed at her side. Their path then led them to the Temple of Krufix at the end of the world. They traveled by river, summoned the legendary ship the Monsoon, and were drawn into a messy bit of divine interference involving Kalifi, Kiora, Thassa, and finally, the beast, Krufix himself. They were then granted passage to Nyx. They faced an impossible choice. One of them would have to undergo a god's trial, and Ajani urged Elspeth towards Thassa, the sea goddess of ancient knowledge, murmurs, gradual change, and introspection. But Elspeth was way harder on herself and chose Erebos instead, the second eldest of the gods and the master of death. Isn't that plane really cool? Just me? No? Alright. Well, anyways, together, the dynamic duo slew Xenagos, a violent and egotistical satyr planeswalker who is like really good in some green and red aggro ramp decks for no reason, little side fact here, but they did not escape the consequences. Elspeth was downed with her own weapon by the god Heliod, which led to her own demise, and they fled. Ajani really tried to fight fate itself, but Brimaz's warriors were reasonable men and dragged him out of there before he would forfeit his own life too. Now, when Ajani awoke after that, something in him had hardened, and he wore Elspeth's cloak in her honor and memory. Ajani eventually left Theros, and like my move to Japan personally, he made his way over to the plane of Kamigawa, which is maybe the only plane I like even more. It's my favorite plane. But unlike me, who was lonely when I first arrived, Ajani already had some friends when he moved and sought out his old pal, Tamiyo. Which I quickly gotta say, I have a Tamiyo commander deck, and it is like the most gnarly, brutal deck I ever built by accident. It's so good and fun, but also feels a little bit unfair. Side note, just so cool. So Ajani stayed with her in mourning and grieved Elspeth's death in, the peaceful and somber company of someone who really understood loss. And during his time on Kamigawa, Ajani learned of the Infinite Consortium's not so nice vibes, right? And then shared a crucial truth with Tamiyo. Elspeth had seen Tezzeret alive on New Phyrexia, which really hasn't been a part of his story at all up to this point. I know it comes out of nowhere. All you've got to know is that Tezzeret is somewhat evil, and Ajani would like to bring him to justice. Such is the way of this proud and noble lion. Ajani's surge led him to Kaladesh, where not only do they have these beautiful Kaladesh, pieces, beautiful cards, but also Tezzeret had embedded himself with the consulate itself. Ajani quickly allied with the Renegades, working alongside Ovia, Pashiri, and Renegade Prime, and when Ovia was arrested, Ajani went beast mode and led a sick prison break alongside Nissa and Chandra, a few more prominent planeswalkers you've probably heard of as well. And after the good old consulate crackdown, Ajani stayed on Kaldesh, healing the wounded and supporting the revolt. Then, when victory finally came, he was invited to join the Gatewatch, basically the super friends of Magic the Gathering, and Ajani locked in and warned the ragtag group of spunky planeswalkers here of his former, even bigger enemy, Nicol frickin' Bolas. And they did actually plan to just, face him head on, especially on Amonkhet, where Bolas was incredibly powerful and worshipped as a god. Ajani truly felt that the plan of the group was way too reckless, plus, as we know, Bolas had been preparing for Ajani specifically for quite a while now, so how's that one gonna turn out? After this plan was decided, Ajani urged, I'd even say pressed the Gatewatch to just please regroup on Dominaria, and picked up the baddie Johira and the Weatherlight crew into a plan meant to prepare for Bolas instead of this Suicide Squad plan. By the way, if you want to know more about them, I talk all about them in my Karn video. Go Karn! But only Gideon and Liliana arrived, and they were very quickly diverted by Belzenlock, who I recently learned is not actually high blood pressure medication, that's benzapril, right? So Ajani left once again, determined to recruit some more allies before the inevitable confrontation with Nicol B, the God P, right? Which all happened on the plane of Ravnica. Ajani now was trapped by the Immortal Sun, an artifact once used against Bolas, turned now onto the Gatewatch itself. Ajani fought through Bolas's invasion alongside planeswalkers and civilians alike. His pride and strength bolstered the resistance, and he also summoned ghostly echoes of Leonin warriors from Naya and Theros in a full-on Lord of the Rings Dead Man of Dun Harrow style move, which is pretty cool, I gotta say. Yeah, pretty nice. And Ajani did not take center stage here, but he kind of channeled his brother's care and honor. And so Ajani instead helped evacuate thousands to safety beneath the city. Eventually, Bolas was then defeated, and Ajani actually survived the war, later mourning the death of Gideon Jura, his fellow White Planeswalker on Theros. But there was some other solace here, as during all of this in the background, Elspeth, it turns out, had fought through the underworld itself and came out alive. So at least Ajani now had a kind reunion with his good old friends. Okay, so remember at the beginning of this when I asked you a question? The greatest question though is, what is stronger for Ajani himself? I mean, his peaceful evolution or the rage that's actually slumbering at his core? Well, it's because Ajani here finally had his full Sasuke arc and became evil. It all started because Johira requested that Ajani set out to rescue Karn from the caves of Koilos. It should have been hopeful, but instead just everything unraveled. Teferi revealed that Tamio had been completed, essentially becoming an evil cyborg controlled by the new Phyrexian queen, and moments later, the Nalish Knights exposed themselves as Phyrexian sleeper agents. Basically a group of evil living machines that always be coming back to mess with all the planes, so Ajani split from Karn to pursue these sleeper agents, and ominously, poof, disappeared. And he returned as one of them. Captured and completed, Ajani was sent back as a sleeper agent himself, still wearing the face of a hero. But Ajani had now in secret begun the process of transforming into a new Phyrexian and served the demonic machine Elsh Norn. Finally, at the Battle of the Mana Rig, the truth came out in the most brutal way possible. Ajani revealed his transformation, killed Jaya Ballard, destroyed the Golgothian Silix, the most powerful weapon for, potentially destroying the Phyrexians, and then helped them capture Karn. Though he initially tried his best to resist his own reprogramming, Phyrexia didn't break Ajani by force alone. They were wise machines and bartered with Ajani inside the prison of his mind. The hive mind of the plane offered him something that he had always lacked: a pride, a home, a family, and belonging. To Ajani, Phyrexian perfection became teamwork that he kinda yearned for. In his mind, he wasn't betraying his friends so much, he was just trying to welcome them to their new home. I'm trying my best to justify it here. During the Brothers' War crisis, Ajani returned to Dominaria to stop epic time wizard Teferi here from traveling to the past. He then later joined the Machine Orthodoxy and presided over Karn's own dismantling, which is really messed up because Karn and Ajani were total homies before that. Ajani even rid himself of Elspeth's cloak, a true symbol of descent into machinery and evil. Further completion also followed. Ajani's flesh was stripped away and replaced with porcelain plates, and when other planeswalkers reached the Seed Core, Ajani confronted them and offered Elspeth a place at his side. But she refused. He accepted her death, which is honestly gonna make me cry, man, but it's all good because she actually struck him down instead. Hell yeah, don't let him get away with this, Elspeth. You got it. And during the invasion of the multiverse, Ajani, at Elsh Norm's command, was sent to Theros specifically to corrupt its gods. And he actually succeeded completing many of the gods, but was wounded in the process. So Ajani returned to New Phyrexia, and in his evilness, fought against the united forces of all his homies and was defeated, ultimately frozen and taken away. Then, after New Phyrexia's fall, Teferi, Karn, and Melira restored Ajani's body and purged the Phyrexian corruption from him. He retained his spark, but not his peace, and Ajani now walks the aftermath, seeking those he failed, carrying guilt that no magic can really heal, and choosing once again to just keep going. And you know who else keeps on going? Karn, my man, who really had it out for the Phyrexians because he also was one. Sort of, at least. And If you want to truly understand what I mean by that, you should check out this video where I break down his entire story. Otherwise, if you like these videos, why not subscribe? We're pretty low on subscribers still, not even 1,000, so would be much appreciated. And I will hopefully see you in the next video. Have a great week, I guess. Bye.